Tiffany Trump, the epitome of composure, intelligence, and resilience. She has been married to Michael Boulos for 3 years now, but now he has decided to reveal shocking details about their divorce that no one has been going on behind the scenes. Join us to find out what Michael revealed. For 3 years alongside Michael Boulos, there was no scandal, no noise, just loving respect and companionship. Until one day everything changed. In early 2025, the news of their quiet divorce came like a cold slap with no explanation, no denial. All that came was a short statement, leaving those who once admired their relationship stunned at what had actually happened. The woman who once called her husband the soulmate of my life now avoids mentioning him. The man who was always by her side at all important milestones has disappeared from the frame. But this story doesn't end. Tiffany Trump and Michael Boulos' relationship began in a somewhat unexpected way, though it quickly blossomed into something special. They met in 2018 while Tiffany was in Mykonos, Greece, for a summer vacation with friends. Michael, a Nigerian-American businessman, was also vacationing there, and the two were introduced by a mutual friend. Their connection was immediate, and they hit it off, bonding over shared interests and their backgrounds. Tiffany, who had spent much of her life in the public eye, appreciated Michael's down-to-earth personality and his willingness to support her without being in the limelight. As their relationship grew, it was clear that they were very much in sync. Michael was often seen at public events with Tiffany, and they quickly became a known couple in social circles. Their connection was undeniable, and they shared a love for travel, family, and the more quiet moments of life. Tiffany's family, including her father, former President Donald Trump, was supportive of the relationship, and Michael was often photographed attending family events. Their relationship seemed like a fairy tale, with Michael getting along well with Tiffany's family and showing a genuine interest in her life. In January 2021, just before the end of her father's presidency, Tiffany and Michael got engaged, making their bond even stronger. However, like many relationships that begin under the intense scrutiny of the public eye, cracks started to appear as time passed. Though their engagement was celebrated with excitement and joy, the pressures of constant media attention and the complexities of living in the public spotlight began to take a toll on their relationship. Tiffany and Michael, once inseparable, started showing signs of strain as they navigated the expectations that came with being in such a high-profile relationship. Though the couple tried to maintain their privacy, the weight of being in the Trump family's orbit and managing the intense public interest began to create challenges they hadn't initially anticipated. These struggles, though not publicly detailed, hinted at the difficulty of balancing a relationship with the demands of being in the Trump spotlight. However, as time passed, cracks started to show, though they were subtle at first. It wasn't something that happened overnight, but rather something that crept in slowly. The first sign came when Tiffany and Michael began to make fewer public appearances together. Their once frequent posts on social media, which had once been filled with affectionate captions and images of shared vacations, suddenly became sparse. Tiffany, who had once proudly shared moments from their travels, stopped posting photos of Michael. Her Instagram feed, which had once been a place for public displays of affection, turned into a more professional showcase of her public appearances and causes she supported. Michael, on the other hand, became almost invisible in the media, no longer sharing photos of their time together or attending public events as he had in the past. At first, this shift seemed like nothing more than a natural change. After all, Tiffany was a busy woman, working hard to build her career and navigate the complexities of being a member of the Trump family. Michael, too, had his own commitments, and perhaps the public simply wasn't meant to see everything. But as time went on, the absence of Michael in Tiffany's life started to raise questions. The once coupled duo that had been so open about their love seemed to be drifting apart, and the media couldn't help but take notice. Subtle whispers began to circulate among the Hollywood elite and social circles, with sources close to Tiffany and Michael hinting that things weren't as picture-perfect as they seemed. The couple, once inseparable, now appeared to be living separate lives, with no explanation for the sudden distance. Tiffany, typically reserved and private, didn't address the rumors publicly. She continued to keep a composed exterior, attending public events and engagements, but her demeanor had changed. Friends and close associates noticed that she wasn't the same. She appeared more reserved, quieter than usual, and often seemed distracted or lost in thought. When asked about Michael, she would offer polite but vague responses, her eyes betraying a hint of unease. The once blossoming love story between her and Michael seemed to have lost some of its spark, and for those who had been following their relationship from the beginning, it became increasingly difficult to ignore the tension that was starting to form in the public eye. The speculation intensified when Tiffany started attending events on her own. At one gala, where she had previously been seen hand in hand with Michael, she appeared alone, greeting guests with a polite but distant smile. The absence of her husband was noted by several in attendance, and whispers about the couple's relationship began to grow louder. When the press asked about Michael's whereabouts, Tiffany would simply smile and offer a neutral response, never elaborating further. Her silence, paired with the noticeable absence of her husband, was enough to fuel the growing rumors. Fans and followers who had once admired their connection began to question if something was wrong. But the true turning point came when Tiffany started posting more personal content on social media. Her posts, once filled with photos of happy moments with Michael, began to shift toward a more introspective tone. Instead of the usual carefree pictures of the couple, Tiffany now shared more about her travels alone, her career milestones, and her thoughts on various causes. While she continued to engage with her followers, the posts no longer carried the same warmth and personal connection. There was an emotional distance in her captions that had not been there before. Fans who had once admired her relationship with Michael now started speculating that perhaps their marriage was going through a rough patch. It was clear that the couple was no longer the united front they once appeared to be. Michael's presence in Tiffany's life had become a rare sight, and the public was left to wonder why. Had something happened between them? Or was it simply the natural ebb and flow of a relationship that had faced the pressures of fame? The media began digging deeper, reaching out to friends and associates, trying to piece together the puzzle. What they discovered was a picture of a couple growing apart in a very private way. Although neither Tiffany nor Michael confirmed anything, the rumors continued to swirl. The turning point came when Tiffany was photographed at a family gathering without Michael by her side. The absence of her husband from such a significant event did not go unnoticed. The media seized upon the image, with some speculating that the couple's relationship was in serious trouble. The silence from both Tiffany and Michael only added to the mystery. They had both always kept their personal lives relatively private, but now their quiet distance was speaking louder than anything they could have said. In the following weeks, the rumors became more persistent. Some outlets reported that Tiffany and Michael had been living separately for months, while others suggested that the couple had been quietly working through their issues without involving the public. The lack of official statements from either party allowed the rumors to grow, feeding the public's curiosity about what was really going on. Fans who had once followed their love story with excitement were now left with more questions than answers. The media frenzy reached a peak when, just before the holiday season, Tiffany and Michael's relationship became the subject of a particularly biting tabloid story. It suggested that their marriage was on the verge of collapse, and the two had been in talks about a potential divorce. The article included unverified sources claiming that Michael had been seen in public without his wedding ring and had been spending more time apart from Tiffany than with her. The speculation was relentless, and the pressure mounted on Tiffany to address the rumors. Through it all, Tiffany remained composed. She did not release a statement addressing the rumors, and she continued to maintain her distance from the media. She attended public events, but her demeanor was different, more guarded, less open. Her relationship with Michael, once a public display of affection, had become a quiet affair. The rumors about their marriage, though never officially confirmed, had taken on a life of their own. The media continued to speculate, but Tiffany and Michael stayed silent, leaving the world to wonder what had happened to the once idyllic couple. The quiet announcement of Tiffany Trump and Michael Boulos' divorce came as a shock to the public, especially given the once immaculate image of their relationship. For years, the couple had been admired for their seemingly perfect love story, a romantic tale that started with a chance encounter in Mykonos, Greece, blossomed into a steady partnership, and culminated in an engagement that garnered attention from all corners of the media. Together, Tiffany and Michael appeared to be the picture of modern love. Their public appearances were marked by smiles, affection, and a calm demeanor that stood in stark contrast to the more dramatic and often chaotic lives of other public figures. For Tiffany, whose life had always been a balancing act between being a member of the Trump family and pursuing her own career, her relationship with Michael had provided a sense of stability and peace. So, when the announcement of their divorce came, it was not in a grandiose, media-filled spectacle, but in a quiet, understated statement that left many wondering what had really happened. The news broke in early 2025, with a brief message shared by both Tiffany and Michael through their respective representatives. It was straightforward and devoid of any emotion, simply confirming that they had finalized their divorce. There was no explanation, no details about the reasons behind the separation, just a request for privacy. The statement thanked the public and their families for their support and asked for understanding during this difficult time. What was perhaps the most striking about the announcement was its lack of drama. Unlike the high-profile divorces of other celebrities, there were no allegations, no public feuds, and no scandalous headlines. The couple's split seemed to come out of nowhere, leaving the media and their fans puzzled. In the immediate aftermath, the media frenzy that followed this announcement was intense. The lack of details fueled speculation. People who had watched their relationship unfold in the public eye began to ask, what went wrong? Tiffany, typically a private figure, had kept her personal life mostly under wraps for years. Even when her relationship with Michael was flourishing, she was never one to overshare or bask in the limelight. They hadn't been known for public fights or controversies. On the contrary, their relationship was viewed as one of the rare examples of a celebrity couple that managed to maintain a low profile while still being in the public eye. And so, when news of their divorce came, it felt jarring and left many feeling uneasy. People weren't sure if it was a matter of personal differences or if something more complicated lay behind the scenes. The tabloids, always quick to latch onto the smallest details, began to dig deeper into the timeline of Tiffany and Michael's relationship. They began to revisit old photos, interviews, and public appearances in an attempt to uncover the hidden cracks that had led to the divorce. They scoured social media for any clues, examining each post for hidden meanings, looking for signs that the marriage had been on the rocks before the announcement was made. The lack of photos of the two together in recent months only added fuel to the fire. Articles began to appear, suggesting that the couple had been living apart for some time, despite their continued public appearances at family events. Some tabloids even went so far as to claim that Michael had been seen with another woman, but these rumors were never substantiated. The idea that something serious was going on behind closed doors became a central theme in the coverage. As the media frenzy grew, Tiffany's family found themselves thrust into the center of it all. The Trump family, known for their very public lives, was often scrutinized for their every move. The media began to question Donald Trump and his reaction to his daughter's divorce. Some outlets suggested that the former president, known for his strong public persona, was disappointed by the split, while others speculated about the impact it might have on the Trump family's image. It didn't help that Tiffany's siblings, who had been more involved in politics and public life, had not offered any public comments about the divorce. The silence only fueled the rumors further. People wondered if there had been any pressure from Tiffany's father or the Trump family, though no such details were ever confirmed. In the weeks following the announcement, Tiffany kept a low profile. She was seen out in public, but she rarely commented on the divorce or offered any personal insight into what had happened. Her posts on social media, once filled with moments from her life with Michael, were now focused more on her career and her personal projects. She shared photos of herself at charity events, advocating for causes she cared about, but rarely did she mention her personal life. When asked about the divorce in interviews, she offered a brief, polite response, but made it clear that she wasn't ready to share more. She seemed determined to keep the details of her split private, a decision that only deepened the public's curiosity about what had truly happened between her and Michael. Michael, too, kept to himself. He was rarely seen in the media after the announcement, and it seemed as though he had retreated from the public spotlight entirely. Friends close to Michael claimed that he was struggling with the emotional toll of the divorce, though he too had not made any public comments about the reasons behind the separation. His absence from the media only added to the mystery surrounding the divorce. As the weeks turned into months, speculation continued, with various theories emerging about the cause of the split. Some suggested that Tiffany and Michael had simply grown apart, their relationship fading under the pressures of public life. Others suggested that there had been more personal struggles at play, but no one knew for sure. The divorce itself was handled with the utmost discretion, and neither Tiffany nor Michael made any attempt to make the situation more public than it needed to be. The lack of any dramatic statements or public displays of anger from either side only added to the sense of confusion. This wasn't the typical high-profile divorce where both parties engaged in public feuding or media battles. Instead, it was quiet, almost clinical, with both parties simply moving on with their lives. In the months that followed, the media eventually moved on to other stories, but the quiet nature of Tiffany and Michael's divorce remained a subject of intrigue. For Tiffany, it was clear that she wanted to put this chapter behind her and focus on her future, while Michael's next steps were equally private. Although the divorce wasn't filled with scandal or controversy, the media coverage of Tiffany and Michael's split raised important questions about the pressures of being in a high-profile relationship. Despite their efforts to keep things private, the world still wanted to know what went wrong. Tiffany, however, made it clear that she wasn't going to allow her marriage to define her, and that she would move forward on her own terms. She continued with her career, supporting various causes and focusing on her personal growth. Michael, too, moved on with his life, but the public's curiosity about what had really happened between them remained a lingering question for those who had followed their love story from the beginning. As the months passed following the quiet divorce announcement, both Tiffany Trump and Michael Boulos continued their lives, though in different ways. The public, always fascinated by the private lives of the rich and famous, continued to speculate about the reasons behind their separation, but Tiffany and Michael maintained their silence. The media's initial frenzy had simmered down, replaced by the next big story, but the echoes of their split remained in the background. Tiffany, who had always been a private person despite her family's public presence, chose to focus on her career and her personal growth. She spent more time on projects that mattered to her, charitable work, advocating for causes she believed in, and carving out a life that was independent of the Trump family's legacy. She was still occasionally photographed at public events, but there was a noticeable shift in her demeanor. She seemed more grounded, more centered on her own path, without the constant glare of the media that had followed her for years. In private, Tiffany was said to be healing from the emotional toll that her marriage, and its eventual dissolution, had taken on her. While she had maintained a dignified silence throughout the divorce, friends close to her revealed that she had struggled in ways that weren't visible to the public. The pressure of living in a family constantly in the spotlight, paired with the end of her marriage, had tested her resilience. But Tiffany was no stranger to adversity. She had spent her life navigating the complexities of being a Trump, of finding her own identity amidst a sea of expectations. And while her relationship with Michael had ended, it didn't define her. She was determined to shape her future on her own terms, one step at a time. Meanwhile, Michael's life took a similar quiet turn. After the divorce, he retreated from the public eye even more than before. Friends and associates noted that he was focused on his business ventures and personal projects, but he wasn't seeking attention or fame. His connection to the Trump family, once a notable part of his identity due to his relationship with Tiffany, no longer seemed to be a central focus. Some speculated that Michael had found peace in a more private existence, away from the constant speculation and scrutiny of the media. His relationship with Tiffany had been publicly adored for a time, but the pressure of living under the public microscope had taken a toll on both of them. For Michael, the divorce had been a painful but necessary step. He had never wanted to be the cause of Tiffany's emotional pain, and in some ways he had distanced himself not out of a lack of love, but out of a desire to protect her from the weight of his own struggles. After the separation, he focused on healing, processing everything that had happened, and making sure that he could move forward in a healthy way. There were no dramatic statements or grand gestures. Instead, he took quiet steps to rebuild his life, free from the media spotlight that had once cast a long shadow over his every move. As the year went on, both Tiffany and Michael found their own rhythm in life. Tiffany continued to expand her work in advocacy, taking on more responsibilities in areas she was passionate about. She was often seen at charity events, supporting causes related to education and women's rights, but her personal life remained private. She occasionally posted on social media, but there was a new sense of control in how she presented herself to the world. She no longer felt the need to justify or explain her choices. She simply lived her life authentically. For Michael, the next phase of his life was about personal growth and professional success. He began working on new business ventures, focusing on his family's business interests in Nigeria, and spending time with friends and family who supported him through the tough times. There was no desire to return to the limelight, no urge to be the center of attention. Instead, he embraced a quieter, more grounded existence, one that allowed him to rediscover who he was outside of his relationship with Tiffany. Despite their divorce, Tiffany and Michael had no animosity toward one another. Their love story, though it had ended, was still part of their shared history. The breakup had been handled with grace and respect, and both remained focused on moving forward in a positive direction. Neither of them publicly discussed their relationship in detail after the divorce, but it was clear that there was no ill will between them. They had simply grown apart, each on their own journey toward personal fulfillment. Tiffany's divorce had brought her closer to understanding who she was, independent of her family's legacy and her past relationship. For years, she had been defined by her connection to the Trump name, but now she was starting to carve out her own identity. She was no longer just Tiffany Trump, the daughter of a former president. She was Tiffany, a woman with her own passions, her own goals, and a future that was hers to create. The divorce, painful as it was, had allowed her the space to rediscover herself and to take control of her own narrative.